Hello and welcome to the I Know Nothing About Beer podcast slash vlog now. Oh, that's staying in. If this take makes it, that is staying in. Hi, how are you doing, everybody? Good to be back behind the mic. My first time on YouTube. So if you're your first time watching, hey, welcome to the I Know Nothing About Beer podcast slash vlog now. My name is Al at Al the Brewer on the Instagrams, Twitter, and all of that. Hope you're doing well. Hope however this is finding you, you're doing well and surviving through the COVID. And I thought that was something running down my leg, but it was just a little cord. So I'm going to move that little cord out of the way because, no one likes this feeling of like that whole, like, is that a spider? No one likes it. Anyways, oh man, it has been a week and I am so excited to be behind the mic right now. So, let me just catch you up on this. This was originally a very long, like 25-minute episode of one of my Barstool rants. Yes, the series is back. I'm going to be doing it for this season 3.5. And this one that I did was like 25 minutes long. YouTube did not like me uploading a 25-minute video, so I'm deciding to cut it up into two 10-ish minute segments. So the first part of this is going to be why is craft beer so expensive? And the second part is going to be how to do craft beer on a budget. I've been into craft beer, whether it be a consumer behind the bar professionally or now podcaster for over 10 plus 12, 13, 14 years, something like that. So I've really seen craft beer trends come and go. I've also kind of always done it on a budget. I've never really had money. So um, doing craft beer on a budget is kind of my thing. And yeah, I want to share with you some of the tips that I have. So, but first, before we can go to how to do the whole budget thing, we got to think about like why is craft beer so expensive? And let me just do a little definition here because I want to talk to you what I think about craft beers, and I don't want to get too philosophical and go down some really big heavy road. That can be for another time. But here's how I'm going to just loosely define craft beer. Craft beer meaning beer that is coming from a brewery that is smaller than not. You know, Sam Adams, yes, kind of craft beer, but they've ranged into such like a big box section. I just think of them now as like a brewery. Um, Craft beer is generally, I'm going to say, as a smaller brewery producing under the tens of thousands of barrels. And if you're like tens of thousands of barrels, that sounds like a lot. It's kind of small in the world of craft beer. And yeah, so we're going to talk about like you think of that brewery down the road that you know or that your buddy told you about. The brewery that someone was like is a really fun place to hang out in Texas. I'm like totally consider like Community, which is a place that holds like 1,000+ people on a Saturday, all the way down to a place like Brutal, which holds maybe 100 people in its tap room at max. So that's what I'm talking about, craft beer. So, with that being said, why is craft beer so expensive? So, let's get off to first off some of the ingredients that are part of this. So, generally, beer is made from four ingredients. You have water, hops, barley, and yeast. Okay, you have the good old Reinheitsgebot. Water, not so expensive. Barley, there's some barleys that can be expensive. That's a big deal. Yeast, yeah, but no, not really. Hops is a big part of why certain beers can be so expensive. So the most popular beer right now, and has been for the last, since I've been drinking beer and probably before that, what is the IPA in all of its shapes and forms. So we're talking your IPA, your West Coast IPA, we'll even include like, it's not that it's a IPA, but a pale ale as well. Now you have the New England IPAs, East Coast IPAs, however you want to say it, hazy. Those are all beers that focus on hops and have a high amount of hops. And let me just put it this way. A high amount of hops meaning that when I've made stouts and like a saison or a lager or something like that, and I'm making like a 5 gallon batch, I'm maybe using 2 to 3 ounces max on hops for any other style. When I get to an IPA, like a general West Coast IPA, I'm maybe using 5 to 8 or more ounces of hops. So generally, IPAs use double, triple, quadruple amount of hops that most other styles, don't even get near. And hops can be expensive. And hops, as they trend, go up and down in price. So we have hops that like Cascade that were it's still are really popular, but not as popular as they were, let's say like 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, where you have the beers like Sierra Nevada that uses Cascade in their beers, and a couple others of these West Coast style, because it imparts like a really nice piney, citrusy taste. Um, that is now going for about $5 a pound. Okay, and as a brewery, you think of using hops in the poundage. So $5 a pound, not that bad. That's actually really cheap. Whereas opposed to one of these newer hops called like Galaxy, which imparts a really grapefruity taste, especially when you use it at the end of the boil, and you're using it what they call dry hops. So the beer is already made and sitting in the fermenters, and you're going to add these hops just so that they get the hop aroma into it instead of the hop flavor. Because when you add things at the beginning of the brewing process at that boil where you're boiling the wort, that's where you get all the bitterness. And then towards as you go later down the process in making beer and you add hops into that, that's where you get the more the nose, the aroma. So hops, Galaxy, Cascade about $5 a pound. Galaxy hops cost about $30 a pound. And you need a lot of them for a batch. So the first thing that goes into why these New England IPAs, and generally why like a lot of these IPAs are so expensive, is because hops are expensive. And in IPAs, you got to use a lot of hops. You just have to. Then you have the variations on hops, like the fresh hop, the hop oil, all those cost money, money, money. So there's a start. Next, adjuncts. So adjuncts are things that are outside of those four basic ingredients of beer. Adjuncts can be anything from maple syrup, macadamia nuts, vanilla, any of those other things. If it's outside of those four, the water, yeast, hops, barley, those are adjuncts. And again, if you love those cinnamon toast crunch style pastry stouts, the ones that taste like could be a brownie or something like that. A lot of those use adjuncts. Those are going to add to your price of your beer. Bourbon barrels. Now, this is where I had someone ask me about this a little bit ago. What I meant by when something's barrel aged. This means that beer, after it's done fermenting, they will let it sit in a barrel to collect the taste of what has been in that barrel prior to. So, like bourbon barrel aging means you have a barrel that used to have bourbon in it. The bourbon has been dumped out, and now the brewer's going to put beer into that barrel to impart some of that bourbon flavor into the beer. Bourbon barrels cost money. While one might not be a lot, when you compound it on making a lot of beer, that price gets much more expensive. So a normal barrel, you can find them offhand on Google for like $80 to $120 or so for no name, just straight oak, nothing else. Hasn't had bourbon in it, but is just a barrel, about $80. If you want to buy a bourbon barrel that has had something famous in it, like Four Roses, I found a Four Roses bourbon barrel lid, so just the top of it, cost about $80. Just to give you an idea of pricing. So the more famous, fancy, schmancy, known, however you want to put it, a barrel is, the more that the barrel can be charged for, and thus the price is moved on to the consumer. Just a couple more. Time is a big one as well, because if you have a beer that needs to sit and age for a long time, that is either taking up space that another beer could be fermenting in, if it's in one of the fermenters, and you can make an IPA much quicker, or like a brown ale or a pale ale in under a month, whereas like a barley wine or something like that, it's got to sit for several months, or a year or more. So that is literally taking up rent in your brewery, because you could be using that space for something that's going to be churning out beer more. Last but not least, I got two more. Last but not least, or second to last, taxes. Dang, there are taxes on alcohol. I dare you, ask a brewer what they think about taxes. Ask them like how much taxes do you guys pay on a beer? Like, it's gonna be a bit, not on so much as like a per ounce, But when you think of per barrel, because that's how everything's calculated in a brew house is by barrel, at least in America and a lot of other countries, it's by hectoliter. And then this is the last one, hype. Um, if your beer's got a lot of hype behind it, you're gonna be paying more for that hyped up price. And I'll go into this in my part two on how I do beer on a budget. But um, when a beer has a lot of hype behind it, brewers know that, and they know, hey, I can charge up a little more because it's going to sell. Even if I charge up, more, if it's going to sell, I might as well make a couple dollars. Now, I'm not saying every brewery does this out there and that every brewery is like, oh, how much more can I make on this to keep upping the price? But there are definitely brewers out there that are using their, especially for this one-off stouts and things like that, or these IPAs that people are waiting in line for like 12 hours plus for. I'm not waiting in line that long for an IPA. But those beers that people wait in a long line for, brewers know that people are going to pay it and they can add a couple dollars more and make a few bucks more. So that is a very small, condensed version of why craft beers can be so expensive. So I'm actually going to release this as a double parter. So uh, go to the next episode, click on the next button, wherever that may be. I'm going to figure that out in some way, shape, or form. Please like and subscribe. Hit the little stupid bell thing. I'm talking YouTube talk. My podcast listeners are going, Alan, what are you doing? Little bell thing to let you know that I've put out a video. And thank you, everybody, for listening. My people, my podcast peeps, I'm not forgetting about you. I'm going to have to figure out how I do this whole thing now. But if you listen to the podcast, thank you so very much. Thank you for listening. I appreciate every one of you. Please subscribe on whatever you're subscribed to. If you could leave me in iTunes, I know this is weird, but even if you subscribe on like Pocket Cast or something like that, that's where I listen to a lot of my podcasts. Please review me on iTunes. That really helps me out. It really puts me up on the charts. And that's the best way to let me know that you're listening. And please leave me a review. You can find me on all the Instagram, the Twitters, the Googles, everything at Al the Brewer. I know nothing about beer.com. And yeah, thank you so very much, everybody. Have a good rest of the day, night, morning, whenever this finds you. Cheers. Yeah, raw red. I'm digging it.